Truth Unveiled here, and today I wanted to bring this to your attention in case you didn't already know about it. It has to do with the disease called CL, which is disfiguring tropical disease, which is sweeping across the entire Middle East. And it's a disease transmitted through sandflies, which causes horrible open sores as well as disfiguring skin lesions. And this has become a big problem within the Middle East, particularly in Syria. And you can see this is exactly how it looks. But there's something even worse that's going on with this problem in the Middle East. Now, this disease is infecting the entire Middle East region and is especially commonly seen in both women and in children. And it's commonly known as CL and is transmitted exclusively through bites from sandflies and can result in horrible open wounds as well as disfiguring skin lesions, nodules, or papules if left untreated. At least that's what they're telling us. We know exactly where the real cause is coming from, but here are some pictures of how the disease actually looks. And as you can see, it's a flesh-eating bacteria disease, but if we keep going, it has also been reported in PLOS that the disease is now affecting hundreds of thousands of people living in refugee camps or trapped in conflict zones, and around 4.2 million Syrians have been displaced into neighboring countries, and Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan have accepted most of these refugees. And as a result of this, the CL has begun to emerge in areas where displaced Syrians and disease reservoirs exist side by side. And if we keep going, you can actually see more pictures of it and how it really looks on people who have this disease, and it keeps going from there. And also it also talks about how many of the refugees have reported in these cases and how these reports are increasing more and more, and according to research. And I'm going to go to those links later on so that you can see the research on your own and see how this disease is spreading like never before and the real cause behind it. LifeSet also talks about the disease that's been going around, and it says Syrian refugees creating a new epidemic due to causes both environmental and man-made. We are currently seeing the spread of deadly and disfiguring diseases where we have never seen them before. And it says Zika, dengue, yellow fever, and measles are just a few of the diseases that are causing concern worldwide right now. And now another new disease in point, scarring bug disease, as we're seeing. And we know darn well who funds Zika, but it says the disease is caused by bites from sandflies and leads to severe facial scarring if left undiagnosed and untreated. More like problem, reaction, solution by the elite and people like Bill Gates who fund the disease to begin with and who caused it, and then they spread it worldwide. Problem, reaction, solution. But it's a very bad situation. Walid Al-Salam, a doctor at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, said recently the disease has spread dramatically in Syria, but also into countries like Iraq, Lebanon, Turkey, and even into southern Europe with refugees coming in. And we also know about the whole Syrian refugee crisis, that elites like George Soros and all those other Zionists are funding these refugees to come into Europe and start spreading this stuff. So we see once again problem, reaction, solution. There are thousands of cases in the region, but it is still underestimated because no one can count the exact number of people affected, he told the Daily Mail. Now it goes on to talk about the collapse in Syria's public health services that are also leading to this, and it even talks about the letter that the US CDC, or Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, has put out about this CL disease. And we're going to go to later on to what CDC talks about it, because we know they have a hand into this as well, and we know that they play a role with all this too. But it says until 1960 the prevalence of the disease in Syria was restricted to just Aleppo and Damascus, or should I say Aleppo. But before the civil war there were about 23,000 cases a year. In 2013 there were about 41,000 cases. The regions most affected are under ISIS control, because it's always about ISIS when we know the US government is the one that funds ISIS, along with all the other intelligence agencies such as Israel and the UK. And it talks about how the Syrians have been displaced and how it's causing and how this so-called disease is spreading, but what is really going on. Now, the Daily Caller also talks about the disease when it says doctors fear scarring bug disease brought to Europe by migrants. Now, it's interesting because I just reported a few days ago actually how doctors are worried about a super bug that's coming to America that has even reached America. Is it a coincidence that these two things are happening at the exact same time? I don't think so. Now it goes on to talk about some of the things that we've already talked about, how CL is a disease caused by sandflies, at least that's what they want us to believe, and how experts warn it has made its way to Europe within the millions of Syrian refugees that have migrated over within the last year, and how it leads to severe scarring on the face if it is left undiagnosed and untreated. And I've already shown you some of the pictures of CL and how it's affected some of the people in the Middle East. Now it also goes on to say the disease had been contained to the Islamic State controlled regions in Syria, particularly Raqqa, which was under a state of emergency just a couple of weeks ago, and I reported on that as well. But it says the estimated number of patients rose from 6 in 2012 to several thousand a year later, according to the World Health Organization statistics, or the WHO, when they play a role in all this too. And we're going to go to those statistics later on, but right now I want to take you to CDC so you can see what the disease actually is and learn more about this deadly disease. Now this page from the CDC talks more about the disease and more about the different types of the disease and how it can come about, but it also talks about diagnosis, treatment plans, and different things like that. So if you would like to take more of a look on this, and if you're interested in this, I highly recommend you definitely take a look, because these are resources for health professionals. I'm not going to go too much into this because it is research that you can do on your own time, but I must let you know that it is spreading worldwide, and as we can see, it's only getting worse from here. But if you would like to take a look at it, I highly recommend you do. But I also want to take you to what they're also saying about it from the CDC and just where it's headed. Now, the CDC goes in depth on this disease known as CL and talks about how it relates to traveling and what you have to watch out for if you are traveling into regions or areas where this disease is common, and is mostly common and found in parts of the tropics, subtropics, as well as in southern Europe. Now, it's also known to take several different forms, and this section alone focuses on CL, specifically the most common form, both in general and in travelers as well. So now, according to the CDC, it is an infectious agent and it is transmitted through the bite of an infected sandfly. That's what they're telling us. And then it goes on to talk about the history and where it's commonly found, as well as the clinical presentation. Now, it also talks about diagnosis as well as treatment for this disease. Now, according to them, there is no actual vaccine for it yet, because we know vaccines really do help. And I'm being sarcastic when I say that. But then, of course, it goes on to talk about prevention and bibliography. Now, why am I going over this with you is the question, because you need to be aware and see exactly what's going on, but also see exactly what time it really is, because like I said, they're trying to push this worldwide pandemic any single way they can. They're trying to push it any little way, and they're trying to get the building blocks going, the stages of it, the beginning of the new world order. That is the goal for them, and that is what they're trying to push, and they're going to make up any single disease that they can, because we know they're the ones who make the disease to begin with. We know they're the ones who fund these diseases and function them in laboratories and secret laboratories, and then they use Bill Gates and other Illuminati agents in order to spread them worldwide. And that's why we see much of the problems that we're seeing today in so-called third world countries. But they're going to keep doing this because that's part of the plan of what? Depopulation Agenda 2030, courtesy the UN. At the World Health Organization website that talks about neglected tropical diseases, and this is the fact sheet for the CL, which you can read on your own time. Now, it talks about some of the infectious agents, but it also talks about the case definition, and it also talks about those who have a suspected case, but also the difference between that and a confirmed case. Now, it also talks about some of the periods during the incubation and the communicability periods and the risk factors as well. And of course, we see the confirmed cases with countries that have been affected by the crises in Syria, and it talks about some of the confirmed cases that have been confirmed in Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey. Now, it also goes on to talk about some of the history, more of the risk factors, as well as control and preventive measures according to them. But what if I told you that they're the ones who helped cause and trigger all of this madness, because that is exactly what they are doing. That is what they get paid to do every single day, every single chance they get. Now, this is the actual report that comes from the Journal of the PLOS that I talked about earlier from the Independent, that talks about some of the regions that this disease has hit and where CL is most commonly found. And this was published back on May 26th. I'll leave the link below so that you can see it. But I want to go over the figures with you so that you can see exactly how this disease has increased and upticked in Syria specifically, and how it's not only uptick and hit Syria specifically, but also how the immigration and the refugee crises has spread to other Middle Eastern nations too. Very interesting. Is it a surprise or a coincidence that around the same time that we see all of the influx of the Syrian refugees leaving Syria and migrating to other places, that we also just so happen to see a rise of CL? Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. Now I've enlarged the graph so that you can see it better, but as you can see to the left, it says the number of CL cases, and as you can see on the bottom, it corresponds by the year, and on the blue line, you can see Syria right here in the light blue, and the dark blue is Jordan, and then this line right here is Iraq, and then the green is Saudi Arabia. Now it's interesting because around the year 2007, late 2007, early 2008, you see the cases started to really increase in Syria between 2007, 2008, and around 2011, where the increase nearly more than doubled of number of CL cases and even rose from there, and have only consistently have risen even more in Syria alone. But all of the other nations in the Middle East have not risen at all. In fact, in Iraq alone, the cases have dropped and the cases have remained steady in Jordan and even decreased in Saudi Arabia. So one has to question, why are we seeing this in Syria specifically when Syria is already war torn? Is there something else going on? Is there something deeper going on here? Of course there is, and I hope you're seeing the bigger agenda and how this plays in with the whole refugee crisis and the immigration crisis, the one that's funded and staged and planned ahead of time by the alphabet soups and by all those intelligence agencies and those terrorists known as the Zionists from Israel. But as you can see, this is the graph that's enlarged that was also taken from the PLOS journal, and as you can see, this talks about all of the Syrian refugees and where these refugees have been located out of Syria. As you can see, over 2 million of them have been placed in Turkey, according to this graph, and then another 1 to 2 million have been placed in Lebanon, and then another 500,000 to 1 million have been sent to Jordan, and then the remainder have been sent to Iraq and Egypt to flee. Wow, all of these refugees have been sent to all these other places in the Middle East, everywhere except Israel, just like it seems as though ISIS is attacking everywhere except Israel. I wonder why that's the case, but I just wanted to show and share all of this with you so that you can see exactly how they, as in your elite, how they, as in your government, are funding all of this stuff, how they're planning it and staging it ahead of time to cause the chaos. Because remember, what is the goal of the New World Order? The goal of the New World Order is what? Order out of chaos. And this is only the beginning of what's to come. And I hope you're seeing that with both your eyes open, because this is so important to see how they're staging everything and how they cause the problem by causing and triggering these diseases that they make in these manufactured laboratories, or should I say manufactured laboratories. Then they spread the disease, blame it on a sandfly, and then cause all this chaos and upheaval in regions like Syria. And why are they going after and targeting Syria, you may be wondering? Because Syria is not complying with organizations such as Monsanto to poison their food, and they're definitely not complying with the Zionists to put a Rothschild and keep a Rothschild bank there. Why do you think they're rogue nations such as North Korea? I'll let you answer that, but please seek Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha, because this agenda goes much deeper and darker than you think. It's much more sinister than what meets the eye. But this is Truth Unveiled here saying shalom as always.